Welcome to the lecture on human resource planning, looking at the principles and the process specifically. What we have done in this week is to look at what an integrated approach to human resource planning means, what human resource planning itself means, and how it can be integrated with the organizational planning process. We also looked at who the role players in the planning process are, being the line managers and the human resource unit. In this lecture, I will be spending time on the DPSA guideline called the Human Resource Planning Guideline and Toolkit that was developed in 2017 that describes 5 key principles upon which the integrated human resource planning process is built. This also culminates in a methodology or phases that is proposed for ensuring an integrated approach to human resource planning. The 5 underpinning principles produced or suggested by the DPSA include Principle 1, a strategic approach to human resource planning. Principle 2, an integrated approach across human resource components. Principle 3, consultation and engagement. Principle 4, the value of data in human resource planning. And Principle 5, to monitor, evaluate, and review. Each one of these principles will now be looked at in a little bit more detail. A strategic approach to human resource planning implies the integration of the departmental strategy with the human resource plan. Now, what this basically means is that on a strategic level, the decisions would be made that would manifest within operational plans. For instance, specific recruitment and selection strategies to address competency gaps that were identified during the organization and workforce analysis will be developed. The second principle, an integrated approach across human resource components, implied that the different human resource components will share and will align their objectives. This then means that all human resource goals and objectives will translate into implementation plans for each of the functional human resource areas. Consultation and engagement supposes that integrated planning cannot take place in isolation and that a number of stakeholders need to be consulted for integration to take place. This means that management sets the overall direction and goals for human resource planning, but that the value of various stakeholders are then also recognized. For instance, line managers delivering their input to determine what would be the competencies that are required for the organization going forward. The fourth principle, the value of data in human resource planning, talks primarily about the qualitative and the quantitative data that are needed in order for a human resource plan to be developed. Quantitative data would relate to things like, for instance, the number of vacancies or the number of persons trained over a specific financial year. Qualitative data can mean certain observations that were made by managers in the managing of performance, for instance, or it can be results from focus groups or interviews on, let's say, the organizational culture. Different data sources are already used, like for instance Persol, which is the staff software that records all employee data for the national and provincial government. We also have historical data that may be acquired over time within a department through, for instance, their annual reports or environmental scans that have been done by national and provincial departments, inputs and perceptions from line managers and employees, and then, as I said, focus group sessions, surveys, and questionnaire results that may be useful for human resource planning. The last principle is the monitoring and evaluation principle. Now, monitoring means that there are primarily 3 stakeholders that are involved in the monitoring and evaluation of the implementation of human resource plans. At a national sphere, this would be the Department of Public Service and Administration, and they require all departments to report to them on the implementation of their human resource plan. Provincially, the Office of the Premiers would coordinate the human resource planning exercise and also support the human resource units. At a departmental level, human resource units coordinate the formulation and the implementation of human resource plans that are aimed at addressing workforce challenges and to facilitate the department's goals and objectives. The planning process, as suggested by the Department of Public Service and Administration, comprises 8 different phases. These phases being the HR planning and preparation phase, understanding the strategic direction, conducting an environmental scan, to conduct the organization and workforce analysis, identify the gaps, identify priority issues, develop the action plan, and then to monitor and evaluate. In a little bit more detail, the human resource planning preparation means that you create conditions that enable successful human resource planning by, for instance, putting up a project team for it, developing an agreed to work plan or project plan, and confirming the roles and responsibilities of all stakeholders. Understanding the strategic direction means that you align the human resource plan process with the overall strategy of the department. Conducting an environmental scan takes into consideration external environmental factors when developing your human resource plan. Conducting an organization and workforce analysis means to gather the appropriate data on the current workforce and organizational issues to analyze and interpret the data within the context of what the department may require over the next 3 years. Identify gaps in the supply and demand would then mean that you should be able to address what the current competencies within the department would be and what would be the future competencies needed so that you are able to prioritize your human resource issues. These priorities would then culminate in action plans for the priority human resource areas. These action plans set goals and activities that are achievable within the context of the department and that have alignment across the HR components and within the available budget. Monitoring, evaluation, and the review of the human resource planning is then done according to set indicators for monitoring and evaluation. This brings us to the end of week 3. Well done, and I will see you soon.